Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Lauren Moore, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer of the National Ataxia Foundation. And I'm really excited to welcome and thank you all for joining us today for a discussion of a very exciting new funding opportunity for hereditary ataxias. So the opportunity that we're going to discuss today arose from many years of hard work and advocacy driven through collaboration between the National Ataxia Foundation, our wonderful partners at FARA, and of course, many dedicated patient volunteers who participated in Hilde and many other advocacy efforts to now have hereditary ataxia added to the eligible conditions for funding the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. Notably, the FA was first added last year, and through that advocacy work, we were able to get 6 proposals funded, totaling almost $14 million going into the ataxia research community. So I want to welcome today Dr. Cecilia Dupecher, who is a manager for the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, who is going to give us a presentation today about this funding opportunity. Immediately after her presentation, Dr. Laura Raynham will be joining us for some facilitated Q&A. So please welcome Dr. Dupecher.
Thank you everyone for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking to this group. So I hope that the information that we provide here today to you is useful. All right, and you can feel free to put questions in the chat and I'll answer them to the best of my ability by at the end of this webinar. All right, great. Thank you, Liz. We can go to the next slide, please. So today I'm going to start this webinar with an overview of CDMRP, our Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, which is the organization where I'm the program manager for one specific program there, right, which is CDMRP. Then we're going to go through the program cycle and the review process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the program itself, peer-reviewed medical research program, all the things that are specific to the program, and then the funding opportunities that we have available and what you can do to apply to them. Then I'm going to close off this presentation with additional resources and some tips for success. Next slide, please. So we always like to start off with the vision and mission of our organization. We are a biomedical funding organization, and we aim to transform healthcare through innovative and impactful research. And I encourage you to really take in the word impactful. This is something that you're going to hear throughout this presentation. We're not the NIH. We are looking here for really research that impacts and touches the patients. And we do that by responsibly managing collaborative research that discovers, develops, and delivers healthcare solutions to service members, veterans, and the American public. And this is a very broad audience that we're aiming to deliver healthcare solutions to. This is part of our congressional language. So this is also something very important that you're going to see. You're going to listen to me repeat this throughout the presentation. Next slide, please. So this is just basically the who, the what, the where, and the how. It's our star graphics. We started in 1992 by grassroots efforts. It was just advocates that went to the Hill to lobby for breast cancer research funds. And we had an appropriation in 1992. That was our first appropriation for breast cancer research. And after that, we have steadily grown since then with more programs added to our organization. We try to fund, like I said, innovative and impactful biomedical research. We really look into what's going to bring the best solutions to the patients with these diseases and conditions that are assigned to us. We can fund research all around the world. This is a misconception that some researchers have, but we are able to fund private organizations, academia, and anywhere in the world. And how we do that, this is what we like to call our secret sauce. We use our 2-tier review process, and it involves scientists, clinicians, and consumers. And I'm going to talk in much more detail about this 2-tier review process because it's key for your success. Next slide, please. So here are just a few of the hallmarks of CDMRP. I think it's important to understand where our organization comes from, what we stand up for, right? First of all, Congress adds our funds, our appropriation as targeted research funds to the DoD budget, meaning that we do not request these funds. These funds are not requested in the president's budget. It's just added by Congress in the final bill. We like to fund, as I mentioned, high impact, innovative research that other funding organizations might not venture to fund. We are very proud to say that we avoid duplication with other funding agencies. And we do that by, we have a collaboration with the NIH, with the VA, where we have access to their database. So we will really take a look into that. If there's a proposal that has already been submitted to the NIH, we will not be able to fund. Our funding opportunities, they're publicly announced and competed. This is an equal opportunity organization and program. We do not, unlike other funding organizations, we do not work with investigators to tailor their proposals to meet our needs. Everything that, all the goals that are set forth by the program and how we meet congressional intent, everything is written out on our funding opportunities. So we will not work closely with investigators to tailor their proposals. We follow the National Academy of Medicine recommended model for application review. This is something that was suggested to us right after the organization was stood up in 1992, and we have followed it since then, which is with our two-tier review process that we'll discuss further. The consumers are our true north. They're really the reason why we're here. They went to bat for those funds. So we really try to make sure to incorporate them, their perspective throughout each level of the review process. We are able to, because of the way that our appropriation comes, it's yearly, right? So we are able to rapidly adapt the vision and the investment strategy for all the changing needs that are happening in that in the landscape of research. We have funding flexibility. Our funds, one thing that's important to note, they're obligated up front. So we do not have out-year budget commitments. We have very limited of out-year budget commitments. We do that because once we receive the appropriation and we commit to funding an award, the funds for all the years of the award are going to be obligated up front. There is no different than the NIH. We do not have a mechanism to fund continuing fund and continuing research. And this is mainly because of the way that our appropriation, we are here to meet congressional intent, and it does vary yearly. And with our two-tier review process, we do not have a pay line. Okay, so it's not necessarily the most, the research that has the highest scientific merit that's going to be recommended for funding. We have a second panel of review that's made out of experts and consumers as well that I'm going to talk about further on, but they are the ones that are going to be making the funding recommendations based on the pool of proposals that come in that have the highest scientific score from peer review. We take a lot of pride in being accountable to our stakeholders. All the research that we have funded can be found on our website. Our website has tons of information, so we make a lot of it publicly available. And we have one of the lowest management costs, which really maximizes what we can invest in research. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our FY23 appropriation. These are the 35 programs that were assigned to CDMRP, the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs. So we have 35 programs. Today, I'm going to be talking about the peer review medical program, which is the one that you see highlighted there. It's the largest program of the organization with an appropriation of $370 million. And different than other programs here in the organization, we have topic areas that are assigned to us. So these are their programs. They have a congressional language, a congressional intent that is a little bit more narrow, that can be focused. For peer review medical, we have a list with our appropriation. We receive a list of topic areas that can be funded with that year's appropriation. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about our program cycle, the review process, how all those hallmarks of CDMRP really tie into in the way that we implement and we execute our review process. Next slide. So here is just a visual snapshot of our program cycle, and I'm going to focus more on the circle there on the left, okay? But you will see there at the beginning of our program cycle, our program cycle is really kicked off with a vision setting meeting. And that's where we have a panel, we have a group of experts. We take the input of the advocacy groups to see what's really needed in that year's, what's really needed in the research field of each of the topic areas that we receive. Once we have our appropriation, once the bill is signed, we can release our funding opportunities. And then we go through the pending, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, the pre-application screening process, and then the full application submission. And then we go to peer review and programmatic review, which is the second level of review. Once our awards are recommended for funding, you see there, we enter into negotiations and then all the way to the closeout of the award. That's going to be managed also in-house. One thing that I would like to note from this slide here is that if you see there, because of the way that we receive our appropriation, we can only release the funding opportunities after we have the funds, right? After the bill is signed. So this cycle is going to take, we try to leave the maximum amount of time that we can for the researchers to submit their proposal, but also giving us enough time to execute the funds and to actually go through all these steps that you see there that we have to go through. So by the time you submit your proposal, till the time you receive a notification of award, or it will take about from 12 to 18 months, I would say. Okay, so try to plan for that when you're submitting your proposal. There is going to be a delay by the time you receive the funds if you're recommended for funding. And the other thing that I would like to point on this slide, you can see there right in the middle in this brown circle is the programmatic panel. So our programmatic panel is made available on the website, and they have input in all the steps of our program cycle. So from vision setting, what is needed, how we're going to set up our funding opportunities, what's the best vehicle to fund the research that we have to execute that year, from pre-application screening, which applications are going to be invited or not, depending on the mechanism, all the way to programmatic review, which are the folks that are going to be doing the recommended for funding list. So I do encourage you to go to the website, familiarize yourself with the audience that are going, which are the SMEs that are going to be making the decisions for that year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk more in a little bit in more detail about our two-tier review process. And it's really a partnership. It takes the best that we can from peer review, right? And it's a partnership with a programmatic review. So we aim to fund the most meritorious science that really fulfills our programmatic goals. Next slide. So the first level of review is what I think a group of scientists is always familiar with, is the peer review. So we are looking at the proposals based on their technical merit and assessment based on an ideal application. So if you submit a proposal with us and you're going to have all we're going to have all the criteria that we are evaluating against. So what would be the best proposal? And we're really comparing to that. So it's an individual assessment and it's criteria based. And the criteria that's used for peer review is listed in our program announcement. I'm going to talk a little bit in more detail for the criteria that we use for CDMRP and where you can find them. One thing that's important to note is that in the panel, in the peer review panel, we also include consumers. So keep that in mind. We're going to request for abstracts that for lay abstracts. So it's something that needs to be really easy for a patient that's living with the condition or with the disease, or for their family caregivers to understand what's the impact that that's going to have on on those patients. We do not have standing panels just because it fluctuates every year, the way that we receive our appropriation, our topic areas. So we try to recruit every year the expertise that's needed to review those proposals. And one of the other things is the identity. We do release a list of the peer review participants from previous years, but we really try to keep, it is very much discouraged, the contact between applicants, reviewers, and program staff, right? Like I said, this is supposed to be an equal opportunity program. The outcome of peer review, as we all know, is a summary statement. You're going to receive an overall score for your proposal and a breakdown of strengths and weaknesses of your proposal. And the ones with the highest scientific merit are the ones that are going to go to our second level of review, which is our programmatic review. Next slide, please. So here in the programmatic review, now we're doing a comparison among proposals that have the highest score. And the panel here is really looking at adherence to award mechanism, intent, the relative innovation and impact. So how does your proposal measure up with the pool of proposals that we received that year? The relevance to the program goals. Each program, CDMRP, has their own specific goals. So for PRMRP, how well you are addressing those goals and meeting those strategic goals. And a consideration also of portfolio composition. So what we have funded, what are the gaps from previous years. So that's really the main goal of the programmatic panel. And like I said, we do not have a pay line. So even if your proposal had the highest scientific merit, it's not necessarily the one that's going to be funded, because we are looking into other programmatic criteria here. The programmatic panel members, they're comprised, like I said, of consumers, clinicians, researchers, and we also include ad hoc reviewers to bring the expertise that's needed for that year. And the list of these folks, the programmatic panel, it is listed on our website for this year. Okay, and then the outcome of that would be the funding recommendations. Next slide, please. Like I said, it's important to note that we include consumers on every level of review. They are our true north. And for us, the definition of consumers is patients, survivors, family members, and or caregivers in every aspect of the program life cycle. So please keep that in mind when you're drafting your proposal. We're looking for proposals of high scientific merit, but that are also meeting the needs of the consumers. And they have an equal vote to the scientific reviewers that are on the panel. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the PRMRP, which is the program that has hereditary ataxia as a topic area. Next slide. So this program was initiated in 1999, and in the congressional language, it specifies that we have to address diseases and conditions with relevance to military health. This is a very broad term. I'm going to talk a little bit about that further on, but it is important that you address this to meet congressional intent. You do have to bring a relevance to military health to your proposal. The direction from Congress, different, like I said, different from other programs, is really broad for us. It just specifies that we have to fund proposals with clear scientific merit and direct relevance to military health in specified topic areas. Next slide, please. So with every year's appropriation, we receive that language and a list. And this year we received a list of 50 topic areas that can be funded with FY23 appropriation. Now, these topic areas, some of these topic areas have been with the program for many years. Some of them are new this year. Some of them fall off and then they end up returning to the program. So in blue there, you have the new topic areas for FY23. In green were topic areas that were previously assigned to the program and are now making a return. They weren't there in FY22. And what's important to know is that there is no, in the congressional language, there is no dedicated line of funding for each one of these topic areas. And this is really they are congressionally mandated. This comes from Congress. CDMRP does not have any influence on the topic areas that end up being assigned to the program. Next slide, please. So for our strategic purposes, this is how we decide to execute the funds. We allocate these topic areas into these portfolios. So you can see there, hereditary ataxia is assigned to rare diseases and conditions to this portfolio. And each of these portfolios, they're going to have their own set of goals that we're trying to accomplish for this area of research. Next slide. So how we execute our funds, we put out funding opportunities to the public, and we aim to fund the entire pipeline of research. You can see there from bench to bedside. And we do that by offering several award mechanisms. And I'm going to talk in detail about them on the next couple of slides, but just so you can see here, we start from very basic discovery awards, which are lower, the maximum direct cost limit is 200K. And we go all the way to our clinical trials, which are very competitive. The public really likes this award mechanism. It does not have a direct cost limit. So we fund, like I said, all the way, the entire pipeline. Next slide, please. Talking a little bit about each individual funding opportunity. I'm going to start here with the Discovery Award. So the intent of this award mechanism is really to support that outside of the box thinking, those highly innovative ideas. And we do not require preliminary data for these Discovery Awards. We're really trying to bring researchers even from other areas to try to apply and see what solutions they can bring to the table. Then we have an investigator-initiated award. You can see there we have two options, 1.6 million for an individual investigator, 2 million for a partnering PI if you decide to partner with a colleague. And this is what's comparable to the R01 of the NIH. We can support basic research all the way to translational research, but really we're looking here from a different perspective, keeping in mind that consumers will be part of the panel, right? So we are looking here for that research that's going to improve and impact patient care. And then we have our product-driven award mechanism, which is the Technology Therapeutic Award, you can see there. And we have two funding levels for that. The maximum direct cost for the funding level 1 is 2 million, for funding level 2 is 4 million. And this it really depends on where you are in your product development pipeline. By the end of the funding level 2, we expect that you will be submitting an IND to the FDA. Now, you can see in the box there at the bottom, letter of intent is required for these mechanisms. And I would like to take a little moment to explain this to you. When you submit a proposal to CDMRP, to all, this doesn't matter, to whatever program that you submit to CDMRP, it's always going to be a two-step process. You're going to have to submit a pre-proposal and then the full proposal. Now, the pre-proposal can sometimes be a letter of intent or what we call a pre-proposal. The letter of intent is exactly what it says. It's a letter of intent. We need to do that. You're going to specify which topic area you want to apply to, which portfolio, the title of your proposal. It's a one paragraph. It's really something that it's not burdensome on the PI. And we need that because we can, after we know what we're going to receive, we can start standing up our peer review panels. So this is not optional, this is required. So I do want to emphasize that if we do not receive a letter of intent from you, you will not be able to submit a full proposal. So keep that in mind, take a careful look at our deadlines, and I will show a slide later with the deadlines for all of these. But these are the mechanisms that require a letter of intent. And you do not need to be invited to submit a full proposal. It's not going to be peer reviewed. It's not going to be evaluated in any form. It is just for us to start. It's an administrative task for us so we can start standing up our peer review panels. Next slide. So here are our larger award mechanisms. We have the Focus Program Award. This is a team science, and it's meant to support several, we say 4 or 5 groups of researchers that want to come together and work on an overarching challenge. The direct cost limit for that is 7.2 million. And then we have our clinical trials. Like I said, they're very competitive. We have a clinical trial with a planning phase or a full clinical trial. Those are 2 options for this award mechanism. The planning phase, the one with planning phase, we will give you 500K so you can finalize all regulatory approvals that you need to begin the trial, IRB approvals, and then we will fund the clinical trial as an option if you meet the deadlines, right? For these 2 mechanisms, if you meet the milestones, for these 2 mechanisms, a pre-proposal is required, and the application to submit is going to be by invitation. So we're going to ask you to submit a pre-proposal that's going to contain a preliminary budget, a summary of the project narrative, what it is that you're trying to accomplish with those. And then that's going to go to our programmatic panel, and they are going to make the decision whether or not to invite that. And we do that because these are very elaborate proposals that if we end up submitting the full proposal, and we do not want the PI to waste time on something that we will end up not inviting. So this is a very good way for you to just try out. The pre-proposal is not very elaborate, and then see if you are going to end up with an invitation or not. But like I said, for these 2 mechanisms, you will receive an invite letter at the end by June, and I'll show you the deadlines for that. And then our last funding mechanism, you can see there, it's the lifestyle and behavioral health interventions. This is a brand new mechanism that we're trying out this year. And it's really meant to support non-FDA regulated interventions, right? So it's clinical research and clinical trials that use a combination of disciplines that you see there: behavioral health, psychology, psychometrics, biostatistics, epidemiology. We're putting all of that type of researcher under under this umbrella, so they're not competing with the full clinical trials that are looking at biological interventions. For this mechanism, just a letter of intent. You will not need to be invited to submit, but we do, again, like I said, we require a letter of intent. Next slide, please. Now, for all of these mechanisms, this is for all proposals that you submit to PRMRP. There are 3 things that you're going to have to address. The first one of them is going to be the military health statement. This is a statement that's going to be reviewed. It's going to come as an individual attachment, and it's going to be reviewed by the programmatic panel. And we're looking here for you to state the relevance for the healthcare needs of service members, veterans, military beneficiaries, and or the American public. And this language is very important. It's contained in the program announcement, and it's broad. So it's not necessarily just a direct relevance to service members, right? Keeping in mind that we are also looking to benefit the American public. However, you do have to at least articulate what is the military relevance of it. And some examples there are included, especially for some topic areas that are not directly aligned with military purposes. So here you can talk about the dual use capacity that will benefit the civilian population and also military health, the aspects of target disease and condition that have a direct relevance to military health. And also, this is something that's very important for this audience, is the contribution to family readiness of service members, right? Keeping in mind that mission readiness is very much aligned with military relevance. So if you have a family member that's living with a disease and condition, how would that affect? I encourage you to work with the advocacy groups here. They have a lot of good statistics. That's how many of these funds ended up being discussed with congressional leaders. So I do encourage you to work with the advocacy groups on this military health statement. And then the proposals, they have to address, like I mentioned, one of the PRMRP topic areas and one of the PRMRP portfolio specific strategic goals. And I'm on the next slide, I'm going to show you what that looks like. So here you have the topic areas. This is the rare diseases and condition portfolio. Like I said, each of our portfolios, depending on where your topic area is allocated, right? This one is the rare diseases. They're going to have goals that are going to be aligned to the continuum of care. So you're going to have goals under foundational, diagnosis, treatment, and epidemiology. And all our funding opportunities have the same goals. So these goals are meant to be broad. We do not want to exclude any of the topic areas in that portfolio. And we want to try to keep it as broad as you can, so we can receive, like I said, our congressional language is not prescriptive at all. So we are trying to keep this open, that we can receive the best research that's going to impact the field. And these goals, they were developed in coordination with several of these advocacy groups. So we can really try to bring in the proposal that meets the needs of the population. This is meant to be, like I said, they're broad. It can be a mix and match. So you can choose there if you have other areas of research that you work with, dystonia, and then you can choose a goal from diagnosis. It's really meant to be a mix and match. However, you will need to commit to one, right? That's going to be your primary topic area and your primary strategic goal, because that's how we're also going to stand up the panel. So even if you have a proposal that's like on the fence, I don't know if which goal I should choose, that does make a difference for us. So, and try to tailor your proposal towards that goal. Next slide, please. So, like I said, the peer review criteria, this is very important. It's listed in all our funding opportunities. And as you can imagine, the criteria for a discovery award is going to be very different than the criteria for a clinical trial, right? But basically, this is just an example that I took as a snapshot here, so we can talk a little bit about it. You will see there, you will have a list of scored criteria. It can go from research strategy and feasibility. Impact and innovation are always huge criteria that are scored criteria. And depending on the award mechanism, sometimes it might be that it's not research strategy and feasibility that will be the first one because they're listed there in decreasing order of importance. And the program announcement will specify that, okay? But sometimes for the Discovery Award, for instance, you're going to see innovation and impact as the first scored criteria there. And under each of these criteria, you're going to have a list of bullet points of how your proposal is going to be evaluated. So this is a great starting point. We always recommend that before you start writing your proposal, drafting your proposal, take a look at these criteria. Make sure that you will hit on your project narrative, on all the attachments that we ask you to submit, that you are hitting these, because this is the scale that the peer reviewers are going to use to come up with a numerical score. Another thing that we recommend, once you have your proposal drafted, before you submit it, ask a colleague that is in the field and that you trust to see how well your proposal is scoring against these criteria. Because sometimes we're very much into the own research that we write. And if you have somebody else's perspective, because that's going to be how the peer review panels are going to be set up, we're going to have experts from all different walks of life, right? That would be really good for you to just ask them to see how your proposal is scored. After the peer review criteria, after the peer review, we're going to go to the programmatic review on the next slide. And again, like I said, they have their own set. This is going to be a completely different panel with different researchers and clinicians. Our programmatic panel, CDMRP programmatic panel, is listed on our website there. If you go to the CDMRP page, but they're going to be looking at different sets of criteria to ultimately make their recommendation for funding, their recommendation for funding. So what's important here, the ones that scored the highest, they're going to go to these pool of individuals, and they are going to be looking at the ratings and evaluations of peer reviewers. Like I said, it's the summary statements, your strengths and weaknesses, the relevance to the mission, and then adherence to the intent of the award mechanism, the relevance to the topic area, and the relevance to the strategic goals, and again, relevance to military health. So those are going to be the main criteria that are going to be scored by the programmatic panel, right? All right, next slide. So here we have a list of our proposals and our deadlines. So you have there, the first 4 award mechanisms are the ones that require a letter of intent. It's not a pre-proposal, and you will not need an invitation to submit. The last 2 are the ones that are going to require a pre-proposal, and by June 17th, you will have received your invitation to submit. And on the right side there, you have the full application deadline. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to try to close off this presentation with some additional tips, resources, what we've known that have worked for some other researchers, or where our potential pitfalls really lie in. Next slide. So if I can leave you with just one important tip today, if it's going to be your take-home message, it is read the announcement carefully. Our program announcements, I recognize they're long, they're lengthy, they are very elaborate, but they are for a reason. Every information that you need, these are reviewed legally. There are several layers of review of these funding opportunities. So I can guarantee you that the information that you need is embedded within those pages there. So read it carefully. We, like I said, we do not work with investigators to tailor the proposals. So we try to put as much information there as we can. Look into the program goals, the focus areas, like I said, the topic areas, and careful with the eligibility, the required elements. Each of these funding opportunities, they're going to require different attachments. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Take a look at the review criteria, the sub-bullets under each of those review criteria, and most importantly, deadlines, okay? The DoD, absent of a hurricane, any disaster of nature, we will not provide a grace period. I know that other funding organizations do that, so it's kind of expected from the field that you're going to have like a week after those deadlines that are listed on the previous slide. This will not happen for the DoD. So many times you receive a proposal 1 minute past the deadline, we cannot accept it. There is no way that we can bypass the system to accept that. So keep that in mind. Give yourself enough time. Sometimes if you're working with academia, these proposals are going to be submitted by your business office. So have them ready in time for the business office to have enough time to deal with grants.gov when they have to submit the full proposal. Okay, next slide. And here are just a summary of what we spoke so far. The strategies for success, really try to address relevance, like I said, especially the program relevance, but also military relevance. That's something that I encourage you to work with other investigators that have been successful in the field in obtaining funds, how that was drafted. Impact and innovation, I cannot emphasize this enough, right? We are looking here for proposals that can clearly articulate translatability. How will this work make a difference? How will it impact patients? And even if it is a mechanistic study, what are the plans moving forward? How will that really transform the research landscape at this point? Feasibility, I think that this is the easiest one for researchers. This is research strategy and feasibility. Make sure that you cover all the points that you would cover with another funding organization. This is not something that I'm particularly worried about. It's much more the relevance, the impact, and the innovation. That's something that we are really looking into, and that requires a little bit more attention. Next slide, please. And then again, this is just to bring this home. Planning and timelines. Give yourself enough timeline. We will not have an extension period. I mean, the few times that we have was because there was a hurricane, and that impeded several investigators to submit a proposal. And even with that, we might give like a couple of days. Okay, so keep that in mind. And then ultimately it's grantsmanship. I think that there's how you write and how you sell your project is something that can go a long way. Making sure that it is unburdened by jargon many times, keeping in mind that the audience that's reading this, right? We're going to have consumers, they're going to have equal vote on this. So make sure it's going to be comprehensible for them. You're going to have attachments that are going to be read by the consumers. You're going to have attachments that when you go to programmatic review, like I said, you're going to have the summary statement that's going to be sent off to the programmatic panel, but not all the attachments in your proposal is going to be viewed. They're going to rely heavily on the summary statement. So it's few attachments that end up going to the programmatic panel. And that is written in our funding opportunity. So make sure that in those attachments, you will capture what is important for those that are making the funding recommendations. And review your application carefully before submission. We go through our compliance. Many times applications fail through compliance because they failed to submit a document, and they have to be kicked out of the review process. There's really nothing we can do if they are not compliant. Also take note of the length of each of the attachments that we have there. We have listed what's the maximum length for each attachment. That doesn't necessarily deem if you submit more pages than necessary, it doesn't necessarily deem your proposal non-compliant. However, we will have to, this is, like I said, for leveling the ground and the field, we can't punish a researcher that was able to fit it all in 5 pages and you have 10 pages. Well, we're going to end up cutting off those other 5 pages, and that's how it's going to be reviewed. So it will end up being reviewed with less information, and I'm sure that at some point, with all the review criteria that we have, it's going to get dinged, right? So keep in mind all those requirements that we have, and don't break the rules for deadlines or these requirements. Be compliant, because we do have a very good compliance team that will catch that. Next slide. I would encourage you to go take a look at our website. We have several great resources there. I am happy to answer any questions that you have on that. Sometimes some people have a little bit of difficulty with our website, but please feel free to reach out. There are several resources there, like our annual reports. You can see the type of research that we fund. You can search awards that were previously funded. You will see lots of research and consumer highlights for each of our programs. And I think it's a very nice feature. So you can see the type of research that we fund, how we are looking kind of language that we use to highlight that and how it impacts patients. And again, consumer highlights, they are there. Take a look at the people that, at the folks, the individuals that are actually working with us, okay? Next slide, please. And here is just a way for you to subscribe to notifications from us. If you go to our website and you sign up for a listserv through the website or even an eBrep, you're going to have an eBrep account to submit with us. You can sign up, you can choose one individual program, you can choose just PRMRP, or you can choose other programs if you have other areas of research that you think would be fitting. And you will start receiving communications from us. You will know when our funding opportunities are released for the future. So I think it's a really good feature for researchers to stay in the know of what's coming next. Next slide. And lastly, we do have a series of webinars that are posted on our website. This was more specific towards PRMRP and the funding opportunities that we have out this year. What's new, like the new lifestyle and health style intervention award mechanism. But there we are going to have a series of webinars that I find it very helpful to the researchers. So you can see there, for instance, if you're planning on applying for our Focus Program Award, there's a Team Science Funding Opportunity webinar. And it's not going to be specific for the program or for the program announcement that's out for my program right now, but it still has helpful tips on how to do that. So I really do encourage you to take a look at these. And now I will pause. I'll be happy to take questions. I hope that this was useful to you, and I'm excited to see the proposals that we're going to receive this year.
So thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to dive in here and moderate or not, but hearing the silence, I will go ahead and do that. So thank you very much for all the information. It was really a great overview. So I have received a few awards from the DoD. I'm really grateful for the funding. And I've also served on the second panel, the programmatic panel. And I guess one of the things that really rang true to me is that there in the programmatic panel, it's a different kind of review. So for those of you who are on the call that have been on peer review at the NIH, it's a really different kind of review. You're really given you're given the technical abstract and some limited information, and it's really more of a bird's eye view of what you think will be impactful, and so it's a little different. So there's one question that I see in the Q&A that maybe you can answer, and then we'll go on to getting some perspectives from a couple of people that have received previous DoD funding. So on the DoD grant awards site, are the abstracts that are provided, are they lay abstracts or are they technical abstracts, or can you provide any more information?
They are the technical abstracts that are on our website.
Okay. So go ahead with somebody.
Sorry, I had a question. Is that okay if I
Yeah.
ask a question? Yeah, Cecilia, we just briefly touched about it earlier, but can you address this issue of blinding the application?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot, Liz. So I know that there were some questions about blinded proposals, right? This is something you saw, we have 6 award mechanisms. For the smallest one, our discovery awards. Like I said, the intent of that award mechanism is really that breakthrough idea. We are not looking at your expertise. We're not looking at preliminary data. Actually, preliminary data is accepted, but it really is not, you can submit a proposal without that. So in order, I'm just giving you a little bit of background and history on the program. In order to do that, it was set up this blinding of these proposals. So we would not know from which performer was submitting, who was the PI, we wouldn't know the organization, And that was all something that when you submitted, you had to make sure that that type of information wasn't included in the proposal. And also, if you are looking at, if you're citing yourself, that's something that the reviewers would end up knowing that you're citing yourself. So what happened is in the last two, so it's the last round, what we decided to do was to stop that, because we have found that we had over like 150 proposals that were not compliant. They missed the blinding. And once that happens, we cannot give it back to you and say, please blind it again. It's done. I mean, the cycle needs to continue. Like I said, we try to be fair. It wouldn't be fair to other researchers that were able to blind that. So we decided that the benefits, I talked to the peer reviewers, we decided that the benefits of blinding weren't really, I think we were missing a lot of good proposals just because it slipped in that huge amount of documents, a name of a researcher or a name of a collaborator, and with that we could piece together who was actually submitting. And for both, I mean, the whole idea of blinding the proposal was to not give a competitive advantage to somebody that has an expertise in the field. We wanted it to be just simple, right? It's the idea that we were evaluating the idea, not the researcher that was submitting. But ultimately, I think what ended up happening is we had a lot of proposals that were non-compliant, and I thought that the benefits weren't really there. So I decided to unblind. None of our mechanisms now are blinded.
Great, thank you. And maybe just one more thing, I know you touched on it, but maybe can you reiterate one more time the eligibility, US, ex-US, private, public?
Absolutely. So we can fund all types of organizations. We can fund private organizations. We can fund industry, we can fund startups, and it can be anywhere. The eligibility is anywhere in the world, really. It's not just inside of the US.
So there's another question that came in. What is a typical size of the Discovery Award, annual budget and duration?
So the Discovery Award, if we can go back to the slide, but so the Discovery Award is a 2-year period of performance. Sometimes we can have that, have a no cost extension. And the maximum direct cost limit is 200K. And those are the Discovery Awards. One thing that I think is important, since we're touching on that, they're going to have a programmatic review that's earlier than the rest, because they're shorter, they're in a different timeline. So if you end up, you will probably receive notification of your Discovery Award if you were recommended for funding or not, much earlier than when you submit the other award mechanisms.
And are there any restrictions on subcontractors?
No.
Okay.
No, and as a matter of fact, the way that our acquisition team, our acquisition shop, which is called USAMRA, they are the ones that actually award, right? We are the program office. They are our acquisition team. The sub-award, the onus is on the prime. So we are really not looking into that deeply into sub-awards.
And the programmatic contact, is that from the USAMRA side, or is that from the other side?
What was the question again, Lauren? If
there's a assigned program officer, and so is that on the awarding side or the programmatic side?
you will have two. You will have a grant specialist, and they will work with you on all the budgetary aspects, but the management of the award is made by the program office. I have a team of several people that are actually, after the award is made, post-award, that actually follow up on these awards, and they're dealing with all the post-award requirements that we have, which are technical reporting. This is basically on us. But if it's something related to invoicing, billing, we will always have. So if you have an award with us, you're going to know that the emails, they go to several people, so everybody keeps track of one of their swim lane.
Yeah. And here's another question. Can money from the awards be used for both stipends and consumables and reagents?
Yes.
Yeah, and here's another one. There is not a vertebrate animals attachment. Should it be included in a project narrative, question mark, or should we spread it out into each specific aim? Or should we have a section on vertebrate animals in the project narrative?
So there, it depends on the award mechanism that we're talking about. I think that this is a more specific question. If you can reach out to me, we can take a look into that. So I can see, I would have to open the funding opportunity and see which one we are talking about and where that would go for that specific award mechanism.
Okay. Can the investigator initiated awards be multi-PI?
Can have a co-PI. It's one. The IIRA.
Yeah.
The investigator initiated award. Yes, those are the IRA. No, that is just one more. You can have one co-PI. We are going to request a partnership statement, meaning with that partnership statement, we're looking for what is it that this partner is going to bring to the table that you wouldn't be able to accomplish yourself. We really encourage partnership between different institutions so you can have another perspective, but it is just one. It is a co-PI. Now for our team science award, then we are looking to bring together several groups. That would be our focus program award.
Okay. And what's the next question? Can the discovery award be transferred to a different institution after being awarded?
It's a touchy one. So I will say our acquisition shop, they really discourage transferring because the award is not made to the investigator, right? The award is made to the institution. That's something that we have to always keep in mind. So you would need to have the institution relinquish that. The other institution have a relinquished letter from one institution, an acceptance letter of the other institution. Discovery awards, they're not really that much of a big deal. And sometimes what happens is you submit a pre-proposal or a letter of intent. In the case of discovery awards, submit a letter of intent, and by the time you have to submit the full proposal, you already changed the institutions. That's not a problem. Post award for discovery awards, I think that we can count that probably a transfer is going to be allowed. Now for clinical trials, that is much more complicated. That is something that I do see a lot of problems. Sometimes the institution doesn't want to relinquish it, the PI wants to move. So that's a little bit more complicated.
Okay. Are there other questions from the panel members? You can just speak up if you're a panel member and unmute yourself and participate.
I think before we get into the panel discussion, Laura, we have to let Cecilia go. She cannot stay for the panel discussion.
Oh, no, I was just asking for questions.
Oh, okay.
Not presentations, but just any more questions. I don't see any additional questions in the chats, but if there are any panelists that have additional questions, I'm just inviting them to ask questions. Well, I don't hear any, but
If I could I add just one more comment?
Please.
Okay, so we have here on the line, like I said, we do not have a Center for Scientific Review like the NIH. Our review is done, our peer review is done through GDID. And I have today here on the line Ann Doddelin and Melissa Flatman. They are our consumer administrative reviewers. So they are always recruiting consumers to participate on our panels. So if you have somebody, I really do encourage you to contact them. I think that this is a very important partnership that we need to establish. And also, if there is some scientific reviewer that would like to be part of the peer review panel, you can send those names to Anne and Melissa as well, and they will route it to their colleagues that are actually doing the recruitment for the panels. Keeping in mind that a scientific reviewer cannot be submitting a proposal that year, right? So this is something that I know that it's not a lot of people that are gonna say, oh, I wanna be a scientific reviewer, but I'm gonna give up submitting my proposal. But if there is somebody that already has an award with us and is looking to participate, to contribute, that's a great way also of doing it. And we're always, it's going to be vetted. This is not, like I said, this is not with the government. It's going to be GDID that's going to be doing the vetting, but it's always a great opportunity for us to start collaborating.
It's also a great opportunity for reviewers to learn more about the program. So here's another question: with the approval of Omaxol, I'm going to, well, whatever, for Friedreich's ataxia, what is your view? Omaveloxolone. I think this is it's got a simpler username. That was, and I think this is the one that's probably was just approved yesterday or the day before. For Friedreich's, what is your view or opinion of the appetite for funding additional Friedreich's research in this cycle? And the questioner said, just call it OMAV. So that's a lot better for me. So with the approval of a drug, does that decrease the appetite for the DoD to fund other research on other applications related to that disease in the next cycle?
So the short answer for this is no. I don't know if we're looking into further research on that same drug. That will be something that's going to be evaluated, but the drug was approved. I guess if I'm understanding your question correctly, you can say yes or no there. Is you want to know exactly how Laura summarized it. If you have already an approved drug for that field, if we would like to continue investing in it. And the short answer is we are here to meet congressional intent. We have hereditary ataxia this year. We are going to fund the best proposals that we receive. And if, like I said, some topic areas, some year they come in with amazing research, some topic areas don't. We're not going to be looking at just Friedreich's ataxia or hereditary ataxia. We're going to be looking mainly at those proposals that are within your portfolio, but it's of high scientific merit. If we have several proposals of high scientific merit, just because we funded them last year, that has not, or the field has changed, we have to meet congressional intent. If they are the most meritorious science, we will definitely consider them for funding.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and it was a really excellent presentation, and it's really exciting to have the hereditary ataxias on the list of approved areas for DoD funding, and we're just really excited about that, the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm excited as well to be working with you. It has been a pleasure. Feel free to reach out if you need anything. Please, I do encourage you to reach out to Anne and Melissa if you have any recommendations for consumers. So I really do appreciate that. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Okay, so I guess we're moving on to the next part of our panel discussion, and we can hear from different funded investigators. And Jurian, I think maybe you turned on your video first, so maybe you were volunteering yourself to go first.
I'm not sure if that's the case, but I'm happy to do that since I am already here.
Okay, great.
I'm not sure exactly about the format. Maybe you want to have me talk a little bit about.
Sure. I think there are 3 investigators that have had previous DoD funding or current DoD funding, and you're one of them. And so maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit about the kind of grant that you received and what you thought, how you thought the process went, and if you have any advice for other investigators that may be interested in applying for a DoD grant. So share some of your experience with the group.
Yeah, sure. So I applied for a discovery grant, which was fortunately awarded to me. And by being on this panel, I don't want to profess to be an expert in this at all. I think it's just like any other grant. You try, and sometimes you hit the right reviewers, and sometimes you don't. So this one worked out very well for me for reasons that I don't necessarily understood, but I went again through the whole through all the reviewers' comments, and I will share some of the key points that I think that the reviewers were finding particularly important, or that I could read through the lines that may be beneficial for other people as well. So my proposal was really to look at the mechanistic basis of the cell type specific vulnerability for FRDA. So why some cells are more susceptible than other cells. And based on some of our initial observations, we hypothesized that the vulnerability may correlate with the mitochondrial substrate preference of the specific cells. And we focused on the sensory system, and we've generated some iPS-derived models for both nociceptors and proprioceptors. And as all of you know, one cell type, nociceptors, are far less susceptible to developing pathology than the proprioceptors. So this is basically the background of our proposal. And as I said, we applied for a discovery grant. And the reason why I went with a discovery grant is that I'm not sure if there's still DoD people on the call here, but one of the things I had heard from talking to colleagues in the field is that DoD is kind of difficult for new investigators to get into the system. And so I didn't want to just, burst in with applying for a large grant and a large pot of money and start kind of modest and see if I can get my toe in the water that way. I'm not sure if that's going to be working for future grants, but at least I have something there. And I will say that I'll come back to this point a little later, actually, because one of the comments clearly suggests that this is a useful thing to connect yourself with people that are very well established in the field and known in the fields and certainly amongst the DoD reviewers. In any case, so I applied for discovery grants, and these grants are evaluated on 3 different aspects: innovation, impact, and research strategy and feasibility. The innovation and research strategy and feasibility are both only reviewed by scientific reviewers. The impact is also reviewed by a consumer reviewer. With respect to innovation, I think I had a little bit of an advantage that my hypothesis, well, this is, I guess, also how you can set it up, was a fairly simple hypothesis and a very binary. So there was a clear answer. And so I think that always makes for easier writing and easier logic in your proposal. I think that's a benefit. They liked that it was a comparative analysis using a non-affected cell type and affected cell type. And I think another important thing that could be useful is that my hypothesis included a lot of, or the research included important information that regardless of FRDA research, it's still going to be progressing the field. So we're going to look at regular metabolism for 2 different cell types and looking at differences between them as well. So whether this is an advantage for future FA treatments, not entirely sure, but it's still advancing the field. So if my hypothesis fails, then it's still going to be beneficial. So maybe this is another thing to look at. Our model system was considered a technical innovation. I can't really help that. That was just what we have. And the hypothesis was considered innovative. So that was all good. With regard to the impact, I think there were a couple of points that they were kind of reiterating there. First of all, that it has the possibility to generate preliminary data, and whether this is related to FA or not, I think it's both even if the hypothesis failed, it still generates preliminary data. And it has the potential to obtain new insight into the cell type vulnerability. But the most important thing I think here is that both of the scientific reviewers were commenting on that the impact may extend beyond FA. So I think it would be important to kind of spell this out in your grant. Make sure that people know that this is not just the type of research and the specific question you're asking there, but also looking beyond what the results may do for other research, and in particular research that is relevant for military families or other topics that are high on the list of DoD funded research. Powerful model system that can also be used beyond F4DA research, again, may be important to specify that in your proposal. If you have a model system that is working for the particular question that you are asking, make sure that you also go beyond that and explain to the reviewers why this is, not just limited to the research question you're looking at, but also potentially beyond that, again, especially with respect to other high topics or topics on the list for DoD research. And I think another final thing is I was focusing on a molecular mechanism, and so which has more of a direct impact for target discovery. And I was focusing on a molecular mechanism that, metabolism, there's so many molecules involved there. So there is a high range of a much larger scale of targets potentially available. So that was another thing. Actually, they commented on that with research strategy. It was a clear, there's so many potential targets to be uncovered here. So all right, so as for the weaknesses in terms of my impact, probably this is more relevant even, which was also funny. It was considered a little bit of a weakness that I was working with an IPSC model system, which was also considered to be a very powerful model system. So, I think with that, you can never really do it right. We had a backup is looking into native cells as well. So I think we covered it, but, try to make sure that you already undercut the potential limitations. There was also concern about the therapeutic targets because mitochondrial function is fundamental to life. So if you interfere with that, how are you going to overcome that? That was maybe a tiny bit of a naive statement, but
yeah,
that's okay.
I don't think we need to go through all of the weaknesses or point by point reviewers, but that the reviewer comments have. But just overall, is there anything more general that you have to say about your experience with the DoD? I know from my experience that it's really is surprising how long it takes to get funded. So how long did it take your grant to get funded after you heard that the peer review went well? Or is it?
I think it does take a long time, and there's a lot of an enormous amount of bureaucracy that has to be complied with. We had an internal issue at Columbia that some people hadn't, other funded investigators hadn't done their job, and so my grant was held up by that. But
you received a notice of award yet, or are you?
I don't know. I haven't gotten the, oh, actually, no, I think I got it, but I don't think we have the funding yet. But.
Okay, because the, there are just different levels, but why don't we pass the baton to Merrick next to get his perspective on how things went with the DoD?
Sure. So again, I'm by no means an expert in DoD funding. This was our first attempt, and I'm very glad it was successful. We applied for a different grant. It's a Technology Therapeutic Development Award Level 1, which does not include, it's a 4-year grant, and it does not include clinical trial. So it's kind of a preclinical studies of potential therapeutic strategy or therapeutic device or a mechanism. So this is what we applied. And kind of following up right away on Laura's question about the process, these awards take much longer to be reviewed. Our first information came on New Year's Eve, and at the very last day of December. that was the information. We still don't have anything approved yet. As far as the regulatory process is extremely long, especially if you have mouse studies, because the mouse protocol have to be submitted in entire protocol, not only a decision letter like it is in NIH, it has to be entire protocol and additional form. Same with the human cells, budgetary requirements. So we are still in so-called negotiation process of that. So it probably will be another couple of months at least. So it is a long process. And just the evaluation, I mean, the application was submitted May 25th, if I remember correctly, and the first information comes at the very last of December. So it's a long process.
Yep.
Those discovery awards have a slightly different review criteria. So the number one is impact, and that's similar to what Jolien was talking. Then we have research strategy and feasibility, which is also similar. But then we have a part which is called transition plan and regulatory strategy. So it's how, if your potential therapeutic strategy, drug, or whatever it is, how you're going to develop it to the potential actually therapy. So, you know, industry partners turning it into a startup company, things like that. And that was actually our weakest link. This was our lowest scoring point. And in this case, we do have a special person who reviews it. So Jolien mentioned there is two scientific reviewers and consumer reviewer for some of this. For in this case, we have a person which is called, I'm trying to look it up, technology transfer specialist reviewer. That's what this person is called. So that's one of the, and another category, which in the case of those grants is reviewed, is the personnel. So there's not even an environment, it's a personnel review. So those are, well, reviewed or scored. So this is the scoring part, but there is also a category which is unscored criteria, which I think it's important because some of those influence the general appearance of the grant, the feel the reviewer has about it, and they actually made comments about it. So one of them is budget. Well, that's kind of a, but then there is an environment. So we were commented by the reviewer that a firm letter commitment provided by the chair of the department. They liked that. That was important. So that could be a potential something which may help somebody. Also, we were commented by both reviewers that the application was well presented. I mean, it's kind of a normal thing, but I think it's important because it gives the reviewer a good impression that I think the reviewers then look more favorable on the proposal, which presents well. So that's kind of an important part, I think. Other than that, I think most of the things, I mean, we obviously had strengths and weaknesses of the proposal, but they were really specific to either model used, and those are just the typical things which, you know, will be specific to any research.
Yeah, and I would just stress that I think that you and Dorian both touched on this. There's this consumer review. So your proposal and the impact really has to be obvious to somebody who doesn't have a scientific background. And so, you know, don't get buried in the weeds. Also paint the big picture, the elevator pitch.
Yes, and the consumer reviewer is typically a person who is knowledgeable. So our comments from the consumer reviewer was related to other diseases, how our proposal and our strategy can also impact other diseases and how you can benefit from the therapeutic strategies already used in other diseases. So the consumer reviewers are people who are definitely knowledgeable.
Right, knowledgeable, and also but they might not have the specific disease that you're
Yes.
or be interested in the specific disease that you're writing about. So broad applicability would be another important thing. So Thomas, do you want to?
Sure. We did a focus program award. So, you know, I sort of approach this as like a smallish NIH program project, but I think maybe what's more important is to distinguish between how is this different than what you would submit to the NIH. And I think there are real sort of fundamental issues that are different between sending something to the DoD and to the NIH. I had a previous investigator-initiated award decades ago, on a completely different topic. And so I have some experience with it, and also just to put it in perspective, I put in 2 applications this cycle. One is on a completely different subject than Friedreich's ataxia and as an investigator initiated ward, and then Friedreich's ataxia, which is a new area for me. So I'm a cardiologist, and we proposed a transitional multi-investigator study to try to figure out the determinants of why some patients with FA get severe heart disease and some don't, because it's very clear. So our clinical component is a well-established clinic here, and so we have the patient population. So the substrate was there to begin with. I think what's important, that what we heard from Dr. Dupecher was that she said, read the announcement thoroughly, and I would add to that often, and do the webinars. I must have read that thing 100 times, all during the process of writing this grant, a proposal. We had 4 separate projects that we had to tie together. And here's what I think, based on the reviews, what they really liked was, I'd say two main topics or 2 main issues. One was the interrelatedness and complementarity of the groups, how well they work together. We have publishing track records together, and the other is that we kept our questions concrete goals. We didn't do this as an exploratory, although I slipped in little bits of like, oh, we will look for drug targets and stuff, or therapeutic targets, but really we were looking for predictors of heart disease here. And so that it looks more like an application for a contract with deliverables, and I think it's really important to pay attention to all the attachments that go into this grant. So you've got your technical abstract, your lay abstract, and I think the lay abstract, as Dr. Nepiarella mentioned, is going to be going to the or really paid attention to by the consumer reviewers, and really make that very clear, as clear as possible. Language that say, that a non-expert is going to be able to grasp. And we got really high marks on that. So I think paying specific attention to that. We also paid a lot of attention to the military relevance. I grew up as a military brat on a military base, so I have some ideas about how to phrase that language. And really you get into the, I state first thing, Friedreich's ataxia is not going to affect people in the military directly. There's nobody in the military with Friedreich's ataxia. I bet that. I'll bet money on that. However, there may be carriers. There may be parents of kids with Friedreich's ataxia, and having a child with a neurological disease, I can tell you, because that was the situation in my family, really impacts the deployability and the efficacy of the military parent. And so I kind of played that up. I had fun with that section. So I think that that was commented on by the reviewers. So so I talked about track record, and the statement of work. I think that's really important to pay attention. And they give you examples of a statement of work, and really pay attention to how they do that. They want to know, like, every month what's happening, what's going to be different in one month to the next in a really granular way. And you can't get too detailed on that. You can go to town on that, and the more the better. In terms of the other question, I'm still waiting. So this involves human subjects, so we're still getting the IRB through. So I'm sitting in the same boat as everybody else is. We may get this grant, but it's not official yet. So if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take the.
So I want to maybe add to some of the experience with DoD grants. So I've gotten some smaller DoD grants, and I've actually finished one. And the one that I finished was preclinical. It was a preclinical studies to try to understand the effects of metformin in ALS mice. And then we've gotten news that we just got recommended for funding for a DoD clinical trial, small clinical trial. So we have that ongoing. So it's part of support for an ongoing open label clinical trial for metformin in ALS patients. And I think we've had good success with the DoD. We have some other like idea grants that have been recommended for funding. There's one other one that is actually funded. Well, maybe two, but anyway, I think that the take-home message just has to be really clear. And how is this going to change things? And I couldn't agree more. I think the military relevance, you have to bring it up. It doesn't have to be. You have to think through how you're going to address that. But yeah, there is a lot of paperwork. I think you get used to it a little bit. So there's a pattern to it. So you have to do your own IRB and own IACUC approval at your own institution. And then you have to get the DoD version of the IRB and the IACUC. But usually that hasn't been that different for, in my experience. There was also one really exploratory grant that we were collaborating with a company, and the company decided to drop it. And the DoD was really helpful in having, in helping us figure out how to get the company to let go of it and transfer the award to the University of Florida so that we could collaborate with somebody else on the project. So I think it's a great opportunity to get more funding in for the community, the ataxia research community. And it certainly has benefited the ALS community a lot. And I'm just really delighted to see this hereditary ataxia being, opportunity brought to be broader. Are there any other?
I want to add one more addition to my thing. If you're thinking of a multi-investigator application like the Focus Project or one of the others, the instructions are very clear about how they want you to very finely outline how each project is independent and yet interdigitates or is complementary to the other projects, and they really want validation or justification for the person that is chosen as the head of that project, and that is reiterated several times in the main grant application, and then in several other of the attachments. And so I think it's really important that you be very consistent in all those. There should not be any variation, and yet you're still going to get criticized for it. So one of the criticisms was, this is starting to sound redundant. And then the next criticism was, we really like the cohesiveness of this group, and it's like, okay, you can't win, but I think it would have been much worse had I not been that redundant.
And how many projects did you have? And were you the PI and the PI of a project too?
Yes, so 4, yes, and yes. So I'm the program director. One of the projects is mine, and I wrote the thing. But it really helps the other 3. Well, actually, we had 4 people. We have one co-PI in one of the projects. Each had a lot of input that was very helpful. So we had constant proofreaders and other pairs of eyes to look at things. So if you're doing one yourself, I do recommend going to a colleague. I know it's always a pain to ask people to, oh, would you read my grant? But it's it really always is helpful.
Another question, she mentioned, I think it was June 17th as the date that you know if your letter of intent was accepted. And then it's just 5 weeks later that the application is due. So you must have had to really scramble. Or did you just assume?
Yeah,
you
not only that, but I was on vacation and I was sitting on a watching the Pacific Ocean and writing my grant. And so I think maybe the good vibes of that helped came through in the paper, but no, it was very disruptive.
Okay. Other comments from the panelists? Other questions from anybody? We have a attendee with their hand raised. This as I think Andrew Rosen, do you want to jump on and ask a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see this earlier. Go ahead. I'm not sure what to do to.
I gave that person permission to talk, so they should be able to.
Andrew, are you?
It's not actually Andrew. It's someone that joined using the link that Andrew forwarded. So I'm not sure who it is.
Okay.
But they do have the ability to ask their question out loud if they'd like to now.
So if you have a question out there and you're logged in under Andrew's link, please feel free to ask it. But I'll just open this up to the broader panel and Liz too.
Looks like Lori has her hand raised, so I'm gonna allow her to talk too.
Great.
And I'm gonna lower the Andrew Rosen hand here.
Okay. Lori?
Oh,
Well,
she said that was a mistake, so you can move on.
All right, so how about the other panelists? I thought that hearing everybody's experiences was really great.
I'll be out in just a few minutes.
Oh, that is Andrew. Yeah, so if there are no more questions, I just wanted to share something real quick with everybody. First of all, that this request to stay on the CDMRP list must be done every year. So please let us know if you apply and if you get funded, because this information, we can use this information to help with our request for next year. And then I am gonna share my screen real quick. There, do you see some QR codes there? So these are, the one to the left is to sign on to a letter of support for next year appropriations. So you can sign this letter. We will use this letter for our request. And the one to the right, I also put the link to that letter in the chat. And the one to the right is a template that you can give to your government relation office at your institution that also express support for this request. So please let us know if you apply and if you get funded.
Okay, and I want to encourage everybody to apply and to network and think about what might be a great way to increase the funding portfolio for ataxia, and happy to hear from any other panelists. Any last comments?
Oh, Bridget said that if you sign at iCard, do not sign again. Do not sign twice if you sign the letter.
All right. Great. Well, I don't hear any more questions or see any more in the chat. So thanks everybody for all the expertise, and good luck with your applications.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you, Laura, for moderating.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good luck
Good luck.
to everybody applying this year.
Right.
Yeah.